It was a bitter winter morning when the old leather-bound diary emerged from beneath layers of pristine snow, its edges worn and pages fragile with decades of hidden secrets. The wind whispered across the mountain pass where a local historian had been searching for remnants of World War II's most elusive stories. At first glance, it seemed like just another forgotten artifact, but this diary would unravel a narrative so extraordinary, so unexpected, that it would challenge everything historians thought they knew about the war's hidden conflicts. The discovery happened in the remote alpine region of Switzerland, where mountain peaks still guard memories of a conflict that changed the world forever. Marcel Reinhardt, a local historian in his late 60s, had been tracking family stories and historical fragments for decades. He knew these mountains held secrets, whispers of resistance, of survival, of humanity's most complex moments. When he first pulled the diary from the snow, his hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from an intuition that something remarkable was about to be revealed. The leather was cracked, the pages yellowed, but the writing inside was meticulously preserved by the mountain's dry, freezing conditions. The handwriting was precise, almost military in its clarity. Each entry was dated, each sentence carefully constructed. But this was no ordinary soldier's journal. This was something far more complex. The first pages revealed the diary belonged to Elisabeth Kaufmann, a young Swiss woman who worked as a translator for the International Red Cross during the war. Her position gave her unprecedented access to information that most civilian INSA and even many military personnel would never encounter. What made Elisabeth's account so extraordinary was her unique perspective. She wasn't just recording events. She was documenting an intricate network of secret communications that crossed national boundaries, revealing a web of humanitarian efforts that existed in the shadows of one of humanity's darkest periods. Her entries described clandestine meetings in Geneva, coded messages passed between diplomats, and a complex system of communication that allowed certain humanitarian workers to navigate the brutal landscape of World War II. She wrote about rescue operations so delicate that a single misplaced word could mean death for hundreds of people. One particular passage stood out. On a cold November evening in 1943, Elisabeth described an encounter with a high-ranking German officer who was secretly working with the Red Cross to help Jewish refugees escape Nazi-controlled territories. This wasn't just a story of resistance. This was a nuanced tale of individual humanity emerging in the midst of systemic brutality. The diary revealed that not everything during the war was black and white. There were individuals on all sides who risked everything to preserve human dignity. The German officer, whose name was carefully redacted in the text, was passing critical information that would help save hundreds of lives. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As Marcel continued reading, he realized that Elisabeth's diary wasn't just a personal account. It was potential evidence of a much larger, more complex resistance movement that had been essentially invisible to historians for decades. Her meticulous documentation suggested a sophisticated underground network that operated across multiple countries, using the Red Cross as a cover for rescue and resistance efforts. This wasn't just about saving individuals served, this was about preserving the very concept of human rights during a time when those rights were being systematically destroyed. The implications were staggering. If her accounts could be verified, entire chapters of World War II history would need to be rewritten. The conventional narrative of clear battle lines and straightforward conflicts would be replaced by a much more nuanced understanding of human resilience. Marcel knew he was holding something extraordinary. This wasn't just a diary, this was a window into a hidden world of courage, complexity, and profound moral choices made under the most impossible circumstances. The mountains around him seemed to hold their breath, as if waiting for this story to be told. Decades of silence were about to be broken, and the truth would emerge, all complicated, painful, but ultimately hopeful. Marcel carefully turned the fragile page, his hands trembling slightly. The next entry was dated just days after the previous one, but the tone had shifted dramatically. Elisabeth's handwriting became more urgent, more compressed, as if she was writing faster, with greater intensity and fear. She described a meeting in a small café in Lausanne, where representatives from 3 different resistance movements had converged. The location was strategic neutral Swiss territory, where the risk of immediate detection was minimal. Each representative brought fragments of intelligence, troop movements, deportation schedules, potential escape routes. The diary revealed a stunning network of cooperation that defied the expected boundaries of wartime allegiance. There were Catholic priests working alongside Jewish resistance fighters, Swiss diplomats collaborating with French underground operatives, and even a few dissident German military personnel who were providing critical intelligence. Marcel noticed something peculiar about the way Elizabeth documented these interactions. She wasn't just recording events, she was analyzing them with the precision of a professional intelligence analyst. Her marginal notes suggested she understood the complex geopolitical dynamics far beyond what one might expect from a typical humanitarian worker. One particular passage caught his eye. Elizabeth had drawn an intricate diagram showing how different resistance cells communicated, using a system of coded messages that appeared to be embedded in seemingly innocuous Red Cross communication channels. Each symbol, each seemingly random notation, was actually a carefully constructed method of passing critical information. The diary revealed that this wasn't just about resistance in the traditional sense. This was a sophisticated, multi-layered operation designed to disrupt Nazi infrastructure, while simultaneously saving as many lives as possible. The resistance wasn't just fighting minds, they were strategically undermining the entire systematic apparatus of persecution. Marcel realized that Elizabeth had been more than just an observer. She was an active participant in a complex transnational effort to preserve human dignity. Her documentation suggested she had direct connections with key resistance leaders across multiple countries, connections that had remained completely unknown to historical researchers. A loose paper fell from between the pages, a partially decoded message that seemed to reference a major planned rescue operation. The fragments suggested a coordinated effort to help hundreds of Jewish children escape from a detention center in occupied France. The level of detail was extraordinary: precise train schedules, guard rotation times, potential escape routes. What made this document even more remarkable was its implication of high-level cooperation. The rescue plan involved individuals from multiple national backgrounds, Swiss diplomats, French resistance members, and even a few German military personnel who were secretly working against the Nazi regime. Elizabeth's annotations revealed the immense risk involved in such operations. One mistaken communication, one leaked detail, could mean certain death for hundreds of people. Yet these individuals continued their work, driven by a profound sense of moral imperative that transcended national boundaries. Marcel felt a growing sense of historical revelation. This wasn't just another wartime document. This was evidence of a resistance far more nuanced and complex than any existing historical narrative had ever suggested. The traditional view of World War II as a conflict with clear battle lines was being systematically dismantled by these pages. The diary suggested that resistance wasn't always about grand dramatic gestures. Often it was about small, calculated actions performed by individuals who understood that preserving human dignity was itself an act of profound rebellion. As he continued reading, Marcel knew that the academic world would be transformed by these revelations. Entire doctoral dissertations would be written, exploring the intricate networks of resistance that had operated in the shadows of one of humanity's darkest periods. The mountains outside seemed to echo with the silent stories of courage contained within these fragile pages, tolshes that had waited decades to be understood, to be heard. The silence in the study was profound. Marcel's hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages, realizing the weight of what he had discovered. A photograph slipped from between two pages, a black and white image of a young woman standing near a train station, her eyes carrying a mixture of defiance and hope. On the back, in Elizabeth's precise handwriting, was a single line: "Memory is the most powerful resistance." The deeper Marcel read, the more he understood that Elizabeth's work was about something far more fundamental than historical documentation. She had been mapping human compassion during a time of unprecedented brutality. Certain passages revealed close calls moments where entire rescue operations hung by the thinnest of threads. A mistranslated word, a suspicious glance from a guard, could have meant catastrophic failure. Yet somehow these resistance networks maintained their extraordinary precision. Marcel noticed something else remarkable: the emotional intelligence embedded in these documents. Elizabeth hadn't just recorded facts, she had captured the human motivations behind each dangerous action. Notes in the margins described the personal stories of those involved: a Swiss diplomat who had lost his own Jewish relatives, a French farmer who risked everything to hide children, a German soldier haunted by the regime's cruelty. These weren't just historical figures, they were complex human beings making extraordinary moral choices under impossible circumstances. As afternoon light filtered through the study's windows, Marcel realized he was holding more than just a historical record. This was a testament to human resilience, to the capacity for moral courage that can emerge in the darkest moments of human experience. The diary's old pages contained something unexpected: a series of philosophical reflections by Elizabeth herself. She wrote about the nature of resistance not as a grand heroic concept but as a daily choice. Resistance, she argued, was fundamentally about maintaining one's humanity in a system designed to strip it away. Her words resonated with a profound understanding that true resistance isn't always about grand gestures but about small, consistent acts of human solidarity. Marcel sat back, overwhelmed by the implications. This document didn't just rewrite historical understanding, it offered a deeply humanistic perspective on one of history's most traumatic periods. The mountains outside seemed to hold their breath, bearing silent witness to the stories Marcel had just uncovered. Generations of struggle, of secret courage, of unrecognized heroism were contained within these fragile pages. As evening approached, Marcel knew his work was just beginning. These documents would need careful translation, verification, contextual analysis. But more importantly, they needed to be shared, not just with academic circles, but with a world that still needed to understand how ordinary people can resist systemic injustice. Elizabeth's legacy was no longer just a historical artifact. It was a living, breathing testament to human potential, a reminder that courage can emerge in the most unexpected places, that compassion can be a form of revolutionary action. The study grew dark, but the stories Marcel had uncovered continued to illuminate everything around him. Marcel carefully closed the diary, his hands trembling slightly. Outside, the first stars were appearing over the mountain peaks, casting a soft silvery light across the study. He realized that Elizabeth's work was more than a historical record, it was a profound moral compass. The telephone rang, breaking the silence. It was Clara, his research partner. Her voice was urgent but controlled. The archives in Zurich want to verify the authentication. They're sending a team next week. Marcel looked again at the documents spread across his desk. Each page seemed to pulse with an unspoken narrative of human resilience. The stories of those who had risked everything to save strangers, to preserve human dignity in the face of systematic dehumanization, now rested in his hands. He thought about Elizabeth not just as a historical figure, but as a woman who had understood something fundamental about human nature. Her meticulous documentation was an act of remembrance, a way of ensuring that the quiet heroism of ordinary people would not be forgotten. As night settled over the mountains, Marcel began carefully organizing the documents. Each movement was deliberate, reverent. He understood now that historical research was never just about facts and dates, but about preserving the complex emotional landscapes of human experience. The mountains outside seemed to hold their own memory, silent witnesses to decades of hidden stories. Marcel realized that some truths could only be understood through patient, compassionate listening to documents, to survivors, to the echoes of histories not yet fully told. He would ensure Elizabeth's work would survive, would be understood, not as a monument, but as a living testament to human potential. In these fragile pages lay a powerful reminder that even in humanity's darkest moments, compassion could still be a way to illuminate the darkness. The study grew quiet. Outside, an owl called softly, and the mountain winds whispered their ancient, unbreakable stories.